Hello, everyone. Welcome to Celsius 233, your go-to place for fiction book summaries. Today we will journey through 2BR02B by Kurt Vonnegut Jr. 2BR02B is a satirical short story by Kurt Vonnegut, first published in 1962. Set in a dystopian future where the United States enforces strict population control, the story explores the dark consequences of a world where death becomes a bureaucratic necessity for new life. The title itself is a play on Shakespeare's famous line, "To be or not to be," reflecting the core tension between life and death in the narrative. Plot summary. Everything seemed perfectly fine in the world. Poverty, war, and disease no longer plagued society, and the horrors of old age had been conquered. The United States, with its stable population of 40 million, existed in an era where death had been transformed into a voluntary service, only experienced by those who chose it. The only price for this harmonious order was that for every new life to be brought into the world, someone else had to willingly leave it. Death had become an institutionalized process, governed by the Federal Bureau of Termination. One bright morning in Chicago, Edward K. Whaling, Jr. sat anxiously in the waiting room of the lying-in hospital. His wife was about to give birth to triplets, a rare occurrence in an era where not many children were born. The law dictated that for his 3 children to live, Whaling needed 3 volunteers to die. Yet, he had only secured 1 volunteer, his grandfather. Desperate and overwhelmed, Whaling sat hunched in his chair, invisible to those around him, the weight of his impossible decision pressing down on him. Nearby, an elderly painter, nearly 200 years old, worked on a mural for the hospital. The mural depicted a garden, meticulously tended by doctors and nurses in white and maintenance workers in purple. Each plant in this garden was given perfect care, a visual metaphor for the society's control over life and death. The muralist, however, hated his task. His disdain for the artificial beauty of the scene he was creating mirrored his disillusionment with the society around him. Life, in his view, had become an overly structured, mechanical affair. As the painter worked, an orderly passed by, humming a popular tune that glorified the act of voluntarily leaving the planet to make room for others. The orderly remarked on the painter's work, and their conversation soon turned to the societal system that governed life and death. The orderly, like many others, saw the system as a necessary and benevolent force, but the painter was bitter. He sarcastically suggested that the mural was a lie, and that life was much messier than the carefully manicured image he was being forced to create. The painter's dissatisfaction reflected a deeper truth. Beneath the utopia's surface was a world built on sacrifice and a ruthless arithmetic of life and death. Shortly after, Lyra Duncan, a gas chamber hostess, entered the room. Dressed in the deep purple uniform of the Federal Bureau of Termination, she was responsible for comforting people as they entered the chambers to die. Lyra, despite her role, approached her work with a sense of honor and pride. She was there to pose for the mural, a symbol of her contribution to the system. The painter, with a mixture of sarcasm and resignation, guided her to choose a figure in the mural to represent her, mocking the arbitrary nature of their existence. As Lyra posed, Dr. Benjamin Hitz, the chief obstetrician of the hospital, entered the room, beaming with pride. Tall, handsome, and commanding, Hitz embodied the spirit of the New World Order. His presence was as grand as his role in the creation of the first gas chambers that allowed the population to remain stable. Upon seeing Lyra, he praised her, expressing how vital her work was to the perfect world they had achieved. Their conversation quickly turned to the triplets being born, and the legal implications that accompanied such a birth. Hitz casually asked if Whaling had found 3 volunteers to sacrifice their lives for his children. Lyra confirmed that no such arrangements had been made, at least not through her office. It was clear to all that Whaling's triplets could not all survive unless 2 more people stepped forward to die. In a cruel twist of irony, Whaling, sitting quietly in the corner, suddenly spoke up, his voice hollow and filled with despair. He identified himself as the father of the triplets. Dr. Hitz, oblivious to the depth of Whaling's suffering, informed him that the babies had been born healthy, as had his wife. Whaling's face, however, showed no joy. He struggled under the weight of his moral dilemma, choosing which of his children would live while delivering his own grandfather to death. Hitz, in his bureaucratic tone, continued to lecture whaling, explaining how vital population control was. He described the horrors of the past when the Earth's population spiraled out of control, and he emphasized the benefits of their current system. Whaling remained silent for a while, his eyes fixed on a spot on the wall. Finally, he quietly confessed his desire to keep all 3 of his children alive, but the system's demands would not allow such a wish. His voice grew tense as he declared that he didn't want his grandfather to die either. The weight of loss and the brutal finality of the decision he had to make became unbearable. Hitz responded with sympathy, acknowledging that no one found pleasure in bringing a loved one to the gas chambers. Lyra added that she wished people wouldn't use derogatory terms like catbox to describe the ethical suicide studios, as it gave the wrong impression about the service they provided. Dr. Hitz, undeterred, turned the conversation back to the future. He painted a glowing picture of the world Whaling's child would inherit, a clean, peaceful, and prosperous planet. It was the grand vision that Hitz and those in power believed in so deeply. But for Whaling, that vision was shattered. In a moment of desperation, he pulled out a revolver. Without warning, he shot Dr. Hitz in the head, declaring that he had just made room for one. Lyra Duncan was next, and Whaling shot her as she fell, telling her there was now room for 2. Finally, he turned the gun on himself, creating space for all 3 of his children to live. The room fell silent. No one had heard the shots, and no one rushed in to stop the tragedy. The painter, perched on his ladder, looked down at the scene, his brush still in hand. The grotesque puzzle of life, with all its contradictions, pressed down on him. He considered the futile cycle of existence, life demanding to be born, only to meet death on a planet with finite resources. He let his brush fall to the ground. The painter, too, was ready to give up. He climbed down from his ladder, took Whaling's pistol, and contemplated ending his own life. But in the end, he lacked the courage. Instead, he walked over to the telephone booth in the corner, dialed the number for the Federal Bureau of Termination, and made an appointment for his own death. The warm voice on the other end thanked him for his service, and as the call ended, the painter stood still, pondering the emptiness of it all. That's it for now. If you enjoyed this, check out other books by Kurt Vonnegut Jr. You'll find them in the description or just search for them on Celsius 233. Remember, while our summaries capture the essence, they can never replace the full experience of reading the book. If this summary intrigued you, consider diving into the complete story, buy the book, and immerse yourself in Kurt Vonnegut Jr.'s original work. Bye-bye, take care, have fun.